Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So today's lesson is dealing with the second half of this packet here, the triangle proofs one. Previously, we looked at some examples such as 6, which had parallel lines and alternate interior angles, 5, which had this word bisect, which means cut exactly in half. And you should have worked through the first half of this, seeing a few of these, some that have a midpoint, such as n here on number 10. You should know that midpoint means it's exactly in the middle, and that means either side of it's going to be congruent because it's exactly in the middle. Well, on the first half, all of these have parts that are already there, and you're just filling in the blanks. What you're going to do today is the second half. You may notice it's lacking that whole outline already, and so you need to do it. And so what you're going to do is you're going to draw your T-chart, and yes, you need to do it yourself. And over here we got some statements, and on the right side we got some reasons, and some reasons. And yeah, you need to complete the proof. So what I'm going to do is I would like for you to pause the video now and take a moment to complete this proof. It has your givens up here, and you can use those in your proof. You got statements, the reasons, largely givens, and see if you can write out the whole thing. So pause and do that. Alright, and I haven't put the final line on here, but it's what your first 3 lines should be. There are just the 3 givens. AB congruent to DE, BC congruent to EF, and those are given. And then these angles here, B and E, are congruent because it's given. Given. But our last line here, let's go ahead and write out, and these are the fact that the triangles are congruent because we proved that these 3 specific things are congruent. So triangle ABC is going to be congruent to triangle DEF. And hopefully you filled in the reason already. If you haven't filled it in, it's going to be a side angle side, or SAS. It's because you have 2 sides and the angle where they meet up. So side, angle, side. And it's the same for both triangles there. Alright, what I want to do is go to a couple of other ones just so you can see these again and get a little bit of a refresher. And so let's jump over to 25. So I like 25. It's kind of like just the next level up in difficulty as far as proofs are concerned. It does give you some givens, but it doesn't give you everything you need to complete your proof. So go ahead and make your chart here. We got our statements on the left, and we got some reasons on the right. And let's put these givens in here. AB is congruent to CD. And angle ABD is congruent to angle CDB. These are both given. And now we need a third pair of things congruent on these triangles, right? We got a side, we have an angle, and over here we got a side and an angle. But we need another pair of things to be congruent. If we could get another pair of angles to be congruent, then that would complete angle, side, angle, or angle, angle, side. Or if we had another side congruent, we could get side, angle, side. Well, if you haven't figured out what the third congruent thing is already, it's here in the middle. You can add congruent marks here, and that's because this side, BD, is shared between the 2 triangles. So I'm going to put BD is congruent to itself, BD. And that's the reflexive property. And that's just saying that things are congruent to themselves. So this side BD on this triangle is congruent to side BD on that triangle. They share. So now we have that. We can finish out our proof here. We got triangle ABD congruent to a triangle CDB. And this one happens to also be side, angle, side. Alright, so there's another proof down for you. Let's go over one more, and we're going to jump towards the end, which kind of has harder proofs. We're going to go 35. And this one's quite a bit harder because all it has is this as your given. The shape, this outside shape, is a parallelogram. Well, let's write that down in our proof. Let's get some statements here. And then you got some reasons why we can make these statements. We're supplying proof, supplying evidence why these things are true. You might have heard that. We're citing evidence. Well, let's put this given on here. PQRS is a parallelogram. You think I could write more legibly? Is a parallelogram. It's a long word. And that's given. All right, well, we need to now prove that three pieces of these two triangles are congruent, three pairs of things. Well, just like our last one, we have this side in the middle that's congruent to itself. So we got PS congruent to PS, and that's just reflexive property. And that's where we're at right now. Well, if you're going to get any other pairs of things congruent, you should probably work with what you're given with. Here we have that this shape is a parallelogram. And if you're unaware, parallelogram means that the opposite sides are parallel. That means it's two pairs of parallel sides. Parallel, 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 parallel. And so let's add some marks here. That means these are parallel. And so I'm actually going to write that down. That's going to be an important part of this proof. So I got side PR is parallel to QS, and that side RS is parallel to side PQ. And that just comes from the definition of parallelogram. Well, if you have parallel lines and they're being cut by something, namely this thing, then these parallel lines cut by this transversal make a lot of angles, and a lot of the angles are congruent to each other. So I want you to think real hard about what things can be congruent, what sort of angles could be congruent. If you're identifying this angle here and this angle here as congruent, that is correct. They are congruent. They're congruent because they are alternate interior angles, right? We got a parallel lines here, and then we got the transversal cutting across and makes these like kind of Z shape here. And that's a lot of drawing I'm going to undo real quick. So yeah, these two angles are congruent. And I'm going to write that down in just a moment, but I want to point out that this also has parallel lines being cut by a transversal. And so there are other angles that are congruent for the exact same reason, and it's these ones. All right, you got two parallel lines being cut by this transversal, and you got this kind of Z shape here, making alternate interior angles. And so those are also congruent. So I got a pair here, I got a pair here of congruent angles, and those pairs are congruent because they're alternate interior angles between these parallel lines. And so I'm actually going to see if I can fit this on one line because I'm running out of space. So I got angle RPS is congruent to angle QSP. That's these ones. And put a little comma here. Angle RSP is congruent to angle QPS. And that's these two. So RSP, QPS are those two. And that's because they are alternate interior angles. Interior angles. I'll just make sure I write out all the words for you. And I've added some marks here, so I'm going to add a congruent mark there, congruent mark here for these angles. Now I can look at my two triangles and realize I have a pair of angles and the side between them on both triangles, and that's going to give me angle, side, angle for my two triangles. So I got triangle RPS congruent to triangle Q doesn't have a straight line, QSP. And now my proof is done. So when you get to these kind of ending ones and you have a little bit harder things like something's bisecting, remember that this vertical line means parallel. You got more parallel lines. Remember, parallel lines cut by a transversal makes alternate interior angles or consecutive angles and things like that. Usually remember those sorts of things. Remember what midpoint means. And if you're going to get mastery on your skill check coming up, you want to make sure you have down that you can write these kind of proofs involving parallel lines and midpoints and things like that. So there you go. Good luck on doing your proofs today. Just getting a lot of practice in. And may the force be with you.